Hey folks, I am Rebecca of Blonde in the Belly of the Beast. This is Robyn of Critical Condition. And we have been on a brief hiatus because, as you probably know, if you follow Robyn's Instagram or her Twitter, she gave birth about a month ago, right?
Yeah, 4 weeks. 4 weeks ago tomorrow.
Just flies by.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be talking about her home. So we're gonna be talking about her home birth experience, and then her little baby is off camera there, so we might have to have some weird edits. We'll see, but that's why we're not doing it live. Anyway, if you just want to give us, I just don't even know how deep to go with this, because privately we've talked about everything.
Yeah.
Because I have lots of questions. But I think for the audience, like, because it's mostly women watching, what I wanted to know about home birth experiences and giving birth in general, it was all the gross stuff and the recovery stuff too. So if it ever gets too personal, just be like, all right, back off.
Yeah, no, I want to, like I said, I want to be as transparent as possible. I think that's going to be the most helpful thing for any woman out there or man, you know, who maybe has I get messages all the time from women who are like, my husband doesn't want to let me have a home birth. So even if there's men out there who are watching, yeah, okay, there might be some TMI moments, but hopefully you'll come out of it with a really clear picture of what my home birth was like and some reasons why it could be a good option for you.
Yeah, and the TMI stuff is good for men because I'm 30 weeks now. My husband has no idea what we're up against here, what it's gonna. I'm trying to prepare him, you know, like I can't control my own farts these days. It's just part of our marriage now, and he's so horrified. I'm like, you don't even know what's like, you need to ready yourself. So if men are watching this and it's uncomfortable, just get through it. Be there for your wife. You're gonna witness some delivery room horrors. You know, you got to be strong.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I guess I'll just start with how my labor began. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went into labor, not active labor, but I had my first contraction on Saturday morning. 4 weeks ago.
And you had Braxton Hicks contractions.
Oh, constantly for like about a month. Like even if I moved in a weird way, or like I touched my own belly, or he would kick, my belly would just go rock hard like a basketball.
So how did the real contractions differ from the Braxton Hicks?
So they're completely different. A Braxton Hicks contraction, like for me at least, happened very high, just under the rib cage. Okay. And it was like more comparable to the contractions when I was pushing. Because the contractions when you're pushing are very high, and they're like your uterus is pushing the baby down and out, right? Yeah. And that's similar to what a Braxton Hicks is like. It's like the muscle is toning itself and getting ready to be able to push down. Whereas my very first contraction on that Saturday morning was like a period cramp. It was like a very mild period cramp. Like I've had period cramps that are way worse.
Is that a baby sneeze?
Yeah, that was a baby sneeze. He's just chilling right now in his swing.
Oh,
he's having his like active alert time of the day. So he's just absolutely chilling, which is great. Hopefully he'll stay that way.
Yeah, really. So it was like a mild period cramp, and then I presume it got. And how far apart were they that Saturday?
They weren't consistent at all. And it was like, it would last for like maybe 10 seconds, and then I wouldn't get another one for anywhere between 20 minutes to an hour, you know? So it was like wasn't even noticing them. You know, I was like on my phone, I was like cooking, like just carrying on with my day. And it would just be like, oh, I'm having like a period cramp. And I had, you know, heard many stories of first time moms having like, you know, 24 hour, sometimes 30-hour labor. So I was thinking, oh, well, this is so mild. This is happening so slowly and like doesn't hurt at all. I could be in for a really long haul with this.
But you labor, still knew they were contractions? Because I've been getting period cramps my whole pregnancy.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I didn't have anything that would have been like a period cramp for my whole pregnancy. So I just assumed that when I was having those, it's like a very low pain, right?
Right.
At like the base of your belly. I assumed that when I was having those feelings that it was a contraction, but I mean, I could have been wrong. I was just kind of like, I was like, kind of like just thinking this could be labor. It might not be labor. This could happen tomorrow. It could happened the next day even. So I was just trying to like keep my cool and not get too excited, because it was so spread out, and like I was just not even, I didn't feel like I was in labor at all. By the time the end of the day came around 7 or 8, they were still very spaced apart and very, very short contractions, but they were more intense. Okay. So the intensity and the sort of pain of the contraction had increased by the end of the day. So that's how I knew I was in early labor, you know, but I was still like talking with my husband and like preparing like food and doing laundry and just like, you know, carrying on with my day. Oh, no. Was that a fake news cry or was that a real cry? He has a lot of fake news cries. Sometimes he just likes to yell, but then he's fine. So he's
like, I'm sick of all this coronavirus coverage, Mom. I'm sick of it.
Totally. You okay, bud? I think he's okay. So by around 10 o'clock, I was having like still really spaced apart, not consistent, but more intense contractions. So I got in the bathtub because water has always kind of helped me.
And had you been able to sleep that day to prepare?
No, okay. Not at all. Not at all. And I didn't even think about that. I probably should have tried to have a nap, but I just didn't. And so I got in the tub, I put on one of my favorite albums. I was like kind of like humming through the contractions, be like, oh, this is easy. Like, this is no problem. I can totally handle this. Like, I wasn't even in active labor yet at that point, but I was just like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Like, this is actually kind of fun. And so I was in the bath until the water went cold. Then I got out. And by that time it was about midnight. Okay. And as soon as I got out of the tub, it was like my contractions went from like totally inconsistent and really spaced apart and like very manageable in terms of the pain to like I was in active labor by midnight.
And so you could tell because they were spaced, like how far apart were they at that point?
Like 5 minutes apart.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
They went
that's
from
when you
like,
called your midwife?
Yeah, exactly. She was like, let me know if you have your bloody show. Let me know if you lose your mucus plug.
And none of that had happened yet?
None of that had happened yet. It happened very soon afterwards, though. Right after I called her, pretty much. So it was like,
how far after when your contractions regulated did your water break?
Oh, God. My water didn't break until like maybe 5 minutes before he was born.
Really?
Okay. Yeah. My water broke really, really late in the game. And it was weird. I didn't even think about that. I was just like so in the zone once active labor started. It was like, there was no verbal thoughts. There was no like thinking what's going to happen next. Why hasn't this happened yet? Or when is this going to happen? Or I was just like, you know, in it, very trying to be as present as possible and just like, you know, pain manage my way through it. Okay, I'm going to pick him up. Just one second. Yeah, my water didn't break until quite late in the game. And active labor had properly started by midnight, but it happened really fast. So I was kind of like, oh, crap. Like, this is happening right now. So I should cook some food.
You messaged me on Skype and you're like, I'm just listening to some Fleetwood Mac and just chilling. I've had a few contractions. And I was like, oh, she'll give birth in like 3 days because first labors always go forever. And then you messaged me with like a picture of the baby like 8 hours later. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, it went so fast. It was so crazy. Like, and that's why like when at midnight, when I messaged you, like I was still kind of like in between the contractions. I still felt totally normal. And I felt like I could do things. And I felt like there were so many things that I hadn't yet done because I was 4 days before my due date as well. Right. So I was just like, okay, so this could last for now this is active labor. This could last for another 12 hours, 24 hours. So I should like prep some food if my midwife or my husband gets hungry. So I like made a big tray of chicken and a big pot of rice. And like, when I think back about it now, like that was just so stupid. I don't know why I was doing that, but I felt like I had enough time, I guess. So I spent like an hour cooking while in active labor. And like every 5 minutes I was like having to kind of drop to the floor on my knees and breathe through the contraction. And I was also timing them at that point too. So I knew it was real. After I had finished cooking, I went to the washroom, used the washroom, and that's when my mucus plug and my bloody show happened. So I'm assuming like that probably happened because I was on my feet for an hour, walking around, like doing cooking and stuff, which maybe helped my labor progress. And I've heard lots of women say like walking around and doing squats and that kind of stuff helps progress your labor along. So maybe it helped. I don't know. Maybe it was just like an intuitive decision that I made that it was actually a good thing. But when I think back, I was like, why was I doing that? I should have been resting. Called my midwife. She was like, okay, you should try and sleep as much as possible. But like my contractions were literally 5 minutes apart. And they were pretty intense at that point. Like I would say at that point, they were like the worst period cramp that I had ever had. But still totally manageable. Like I could breathe through them. It wasn't scary at all. But I just knew that it was happening at that point. So then at that point I got back in the tub, which was kind of a stupid idea because I drained my hot water tank, meaning there was very little hot water for the pool later on in the evening. But I was just like, this is really tough. Actually, when I was lying down, I couldn't get comfortable. I couldn't find a place where I was comfortable. I was like, the water was the most comfortable spot for me. And it's too early to call the midwife. So I filled the tub up again, got back in the tub. And at that point, I was like sort of on my side in the tub. And I just kind of started moaning at that point. And I was just kind of like doing like a loud moaning sound through the contraction. And my husband was kind of like bringing me cold water and ice and stuff like that. But like, I was no longer in this mental state where I was like, oh, I want to like listen to music and like stick on my favorite album and, groove through these contractions. I very much had to focus and concentrate to get through the contractions. And at that point, while I was lying down in the tub, that's when I started to really feel like a kind of haziness, almost like a dreamy haziness to my experience. And I'm assuming that's the sort of labor hormones kicking in, the kind of like pain relief ones. And I remember just kind of like staring at a candle that was lit in the bathroom and just kind of like breathing and just kind of like, I didn't even know how much time was passing at that point. When I got out of the tub, it was around 2, and me and my husband were like, okay, let's try and go to sleep. Let's try and just sleep for a little while, even if you're only sleeping for 5 minutes at a time, that's better than nothing. So we both got into bed. I didn't want to moan loud while I was in the bed because I was like, oh, he's sleeping, which is also stupid. Like, screw him. I should have just moaned through my contractions. But I was like, oh, well, if we're trying to sleep, then I should just be quiet through my contractions, which I don't know if that was a good idea or not. Because
how could you even do that?
I don't know. I just like,
but you did.
I did. Yeah. I just was quiet through my contractions and I just breathed through them. And I like, my husband was like dead tired that night. So he sleeps like a log. So I was like squeezing his arm through my contractions and he wasn't even like waking up. That was fun. And then, so that went on for about 2 hours. And I would kind of switch positions every now and again, kind of, I would go into child's pose, the yoga pose, child's pose. So I would kind of go into that. And that would kind of like, because, your uterus is pushing the baby down.
Right.
So if you put your head down and your bum kind of up, it just like gives you like a moment of relief.
Yeah.
Because gravity pulls the baby up towards your rib cage again. And I would do that occasionally just to kind of like take the pressure off. But after 2 hours of that at around 4 a.m. My contractions were so intense that I don't really know how to describe them. Like it wasn't so much that it was painful as that it just like, it takes over your whole like mind. You know what I mean? And I remember all I was thinking was that like, I just had to get to 30 seconds. Cause if I can get to 30 seconds, that's the worst of it over. Mm-hmm. And then I can go back to the 5 minutes in between, which was like bliss. Because the contractions were so intense and so, I don't want to say painful, but they did hurt. They weren't good, but like, it's different than like, if you get a cut or a bruise or a sprain, it's not that kind of pain. So it's just like a different kind of pain. So I guess I could still call it pain. It's just it's a very specific kind of pain. But it was so intense that the 5 minutes in between, like I felt high. Like I was just like, so relaxed and it felt so good to not be having a contraction that I tried my best to just focus on those 5 minutes in between the contractions. And I was just like, thank God I have 5 minutes. Like I know women who've had like no breaks in between their contractions, and I don't know how they got through that. But at that point, like my bones, like my hip bones and my pelvic bones started to like feel like with the contractions, it was like this sort of like tingly, cold, like pressure feeling in my bones with the contraction.
Well, that's new. I've never heard anybody say that before.
Well, it was a very weird feeling. I'm probably not describing it very well, but it was like I could feel my bones moving and like shifting and like the pressure kind of like moving them out. And at that point, I was just like, I need to call the midwife. Like the midwife, it was just like immediately because I could feel him descending into my pelvis, I think is what was happening. And I hadn't obviously been checked, so I didn't know how dilated I was, but I had this sort of intuitive feeling like the midwife needs to be here now. So at 4 a.m, I went to my husband and was like, call the midwife, please. And she spoke to me for a little bit. I gave her the info. She listened to me go through a contraction. She's like, I'm on my way. I'll be there in half an hour. She lives a half an hour outside of town. So I was like, okay, I just need to survive the next half hour. Then the midwife will be here and it'll be fine. And it was. I don't really remember what happened in that half hour because it was so intense. And I was just like so in labor land that I just wasn't fully cognizant of what was happening, which was a blessing because it was really intense, right? And that whole time I was sort of lying on my side in bed and I felt paralyzed for like those 2 hours pretty much. Aside from being able to go down into child's pose, I was on my side because that was the only way that I felt comfortable. I didn't feel like I could walk or move around. And a lot of women say that moving around helps and like switching positions helps, but not for me. I had to just stay where I was. And there's a reason for that, which I'll get into afterwards. So my midwife showed up. She checked me, which was the first and only time that I had a cervical check. And I was 9 centimeters with a very small lip at about 4:30 in the morning. So that was about 4.5 hours of active labor. I was
How many centimeters do you typically like you bear down and want to push?
So if you're in the hospital, they would not let you push at 9 centimeters with a lip. 9 centimeters with a lip is kind of like, it's like a not a very good 10, right? And 10 is what they want, right? They want you to be a fully dilated 10, which apparently is supposed to be that big plus back an inch. So it's like that's supposed to be how dilated you are before you can push. And they say you shouldn't push before then because you can damage your cervix, which can obviously cause fertility problems later on down the line. But at that point, like when my midwife showed up, that contraction, it was like I was so relieved that she was there and she checked me and I had the 9 centimeters sort of check. And I was just like, thank you, God. Thank you so much that I'm almost like at the end of this. I can't imagine how defeating it would feel to be like feeling what I was feeling and like be like a 5. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I understand why women sometimes don't want to be checked because that number can be really discouraging or they feel like they want to give up if the number isn't what they want to hear because you feel like you're doing so much work and it's like, it's hard to comprehend how you could need to do more right at that stage. But I'm sure there are lots of women that would have had an equivalent amount of pain as I was having, but not be dilated as much. So that was like a huge blessing. And that was also really motivating too. But right after that happened was the first time I had a contraction where my uterus pushed without my control type thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I was starting to push and I was feeling very pushy. And my midwife never told me not to push. She wasn't worried about me pushing with a cervical lip, which some people may disagree with, but I mean, I'm perfectly fine. My body seemed to know what it was doing. It's very likely that once I let myself relax and let the relief of my midwife being there kind of wash over me, that lip probably went away. You know what I mean? And it was me holding back for the midwife to arrive that was causing that lack of a perfect dilation. That's what we think anyway. So at that point I was like, can you fill up the pool for me? Fill up the pool. I need to get in the pool. That's at 4:30. Took them about 45 minutes to fill up the pool, which was like also excruciating, but I had no conception of time. I was just like moaning so friggin' loud. I was like a cow. Like I was moaning so loud. And that really helped because it was like, I felt like I was moaning. It's hard to describe. Like the louder I would do the ohm sound, if I could match the intensity of the contraction, it was almost like the sound would override the sensation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Like when I get a shot, sometimes I'll pinch the inside of my hand.
Yes.
Is it like that?
Yes. It's a very similar concept that like, as long as I was moaning as loud as the contraction was intense, I could mentally stay solid. So that's what I was doing. And it felt like 5 minutes went by, but it was really 45 minutes. And also like, we don't have curtains up in our main living area because we have big windows and we like the light in, but my husband put up curtains, like he like nailed curtains into the wall when all that was going on. They dimmed the lights. I had like kind of twinkle lights set up in front of where the pool was. So after 45 minutes, both my husband and my midwife came in. They kind of lifted me up off the bed. They had me under each arm. I slowly walked out to the pool, and I didn't have my glasses on. So everything was very hazy and dreamlike, and I felt very like I was in a dream. And then I came out into this brand new space, and it was like a whole different vibe, a very like peaceful, soothing vibe. It would have completely curated just for me and what I wanted. And I felt so like grateful and happy for that and excited to get in the pool. So I stripped off. I was just wearing a robe anyways. And I just got in the pool, and it was like immediate relief, you know, like when women say the birthing pool is the midwife's epidural, that's 100% true. There was like a substantial pain relief being in the pool, which was awesome. And at that point, my body was pushing so intensely that like my midwife could like put her fingers inside of me basically and like feel his head. Like he was like kind of right there. He wasn't crowning yet, but he was like right there. Yeah. Which was like, I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, how is he so low? Like, how are we at this crowning stage now? You know, I've only been in labor for at that point 5.5 hours. And I was just
right?
Active labor. Yes, exactly. And I was just like, what the heck is going on? And at that point, the pain I didn't feel any more pain at that point. Like when I was in the pool and my uterus was pushing down, there was no pain like whatsoever, but there was just this intense, overwhelming, like mind-bending pressure on like my butt and my like vagina and just like my whole pelvic region. It was just like the most intense pressure that I've ever felt in my entire life. People say that it's like having like a really big bowel movement, but I don't think it really did feel like that because it was very obviously like in my birth canal. It wasn't actually like a bowel movement. Obviously it was my baby. And I also don't agree with the fact that people say that when you do push, it's like you're pushing out a bowel movement because like it didn't feel like that for me either. But so anyway, my body was pushing and I was kind of like, I'm not ready for this. My body's not ready for this. I know women who have long labors, you know, often the hormones allow their flesh to become flexible and sort of softened, and that prevents them from tearing, right? And that's what I was hoping for. I was like, give me this long labor. Like, why is this happening? Like, I'm not mentally able to like catch up with what's happening. I felt totally out of control, right? Like I wasn't scared. I mean, actually, that's not true. I was a bit scared at that point. I knew it was going to be okay. Like I wasn't panicking, but I was just like, this doesn't feel right. You know, like I'm not mentally ready for this. It's too fast. And my midwife was just like, you don't have a choice. This is what's happening. You're doing it. So, you know, this like saying these things where you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You're doing it. You don't have a choice but do it. So do it, right? And I needed that, and that was very helpful. And so I was like, and she also was like, this is the time to be courageous. You need to have courage right now. Okay. Because it was very like overwhelming, the whole realizing that he was about to come out so fast. So I switched positions from being kind of like leaning back to on my knees. And I just prayed for a moment. And I said, like Heavenly Father, please, like, be with me right now, please. I need your help. Like, protect me and my baby. Like, make sure that this is going to be the right way for him to enter the world. Like help me trust in you. Help me have faith that this is the way it's supposed to be. And then with the next contraction, my water broke. And it was like, it was like a balloon popping sound. It was super strong popping noise, but I was like, half submerged. So I didn't see how much water came out, which I'm kind of disappointed about, because I would have liked to see, like that Hollywood, like water breaking moment where it's like, it all flushes out.
Yeah.
Let me just check on him. He's
probably happy.
He's totally asleep. Just going to leave him there because he
probably likes hearing your voice.
So yeah, he's here than he is over there. So after my water broke, I was like, all right, this is happening. And my midwife was like, the Lord is here with you. Like, trust this process. Your body knows what it's doing. This is everything that's happening is perfectly fine. Don't worry. And even still, with every contraction that was pushing my baby down and out, I was resisting it. I wasn't pushing with my body. And because I was resisting it, I was getting these like cramps in my thigh muscles. And then my midwife would grab the bottom of my foot and jam her thumb into my foot as a pressure point, and it would just release the cramp immediately. My husband was like, wow, how did you do that? That's like amazing. Afterwards, that was one of the things he was most impressed about as well. He was like, she's like a witch doctor. Like, how did she even do that? She's like taking care of Charlie horses in an instant. And that's probably something that a lot of people haven't heard before as well, is that, normally at that point, women are like, get this thing out of me. And they just push, right? But I was just like, I need time. Like, I just need this space to let my flesh be ready for this. I just didn't want to tear, So I was holding back. And my uterus was pushing down and out, like without my will. So I was kind of like having to really hold back. But there's nothing you can do. Like, when your uterus is pushing your baby down and out, like, it's insane. It feels so crazy. Like, it's so mine was so aggressive.
Yeah.
It was like someone was like punching down.
Oof.
It was so intense. So at that point, my midwife was like, you haven't peed in a long time. So maybe your bladder is full. And if you use the washroom, that'll help you feel less pressure. And it'll just give you some more time and space. We'll not focus on the pushing for just a second. And we'll do that. And then we'll move on with the pushing or whatever. Maybe that'll help the baby come out easier for you. So I tried to use the washroom, couldn't. Like, I just physically couldn't, which is normal because the baby was like probably right on my, what's it called? Urinary tract. The pressure there would not let me use the washroom.
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, so let's do a catheter. And I was like, no, I don't want to do a catheter, which is like kind of like silly because a catheter would have been like nothing compared to what I just experienced. But I was just like, no, I'm being a big baby. I don't want to do a catheter. She's like, we need to do it. Let's just do it. Just like, stop being this way. Let's do it. So I got on like a squatting, do you know what a birthing chair looks like?
Mm-hmm.
So I got on a birthing chair, and she was getting the catheter, bringing out of her medical bag and bringing it over to me. As she was doing that, I had another contraction, and being in that position on the birthing chair, he crowned.
Oh, okay.
And she was like, there's no time. This baby's coming. Get back in the pool. So that they picked me up, put me back in the pool. And at that point, that I had one more contraction in the pool. And I swear to God, I did not feel his head come out. My eyes were closed. The contraction pushed his head out. My midwife was like, there's his head. And I would not have known that his head came out if she hadn't said that. And then in my head, I remember, thinking like, this ends now. If that was his head and I didn't feel anything, just push.
Yeah.
So the one time that I intentionally pushed with a contraction that was pushing the baby down was that one time in the same contraction. And then his body came out like within seconds after his head came out. And that was it. He was born and he came out absolutely screaming. My midwife was like, she's like, normally when babies are born in water, like they come out like kind of more calm and they're like looking around. And she was like, he was screaming before his head broke the surface of the water. So he came out ferociously. And then that was that. She handed him to me. And so we did a thing called Judy's 3-1 something, 3-5-3-1, something like that. It's like it's a technique. I don't know if technique is the right word. It's like, I guess, a plan for getting the placenta out. Some women will want to just like be cozy with their baby for 20 minutes and leave their placenta inside of them. Because I was having a home birth and it was my first birth, we didn't know what my risk of hemorrhage was going to be. So we decided not to just like leave my placenta in me for a long period of time. So after 3 minutes, the baby had been born. And my midwife was like, she like came really close to my face because she knew I was out of it. I was just like staring at my baby like, oh my God, like he has so much hair. What? Like, how is this over so fast? I just don't understand how fast this has happened. And she got really close to my face and she was like, okay, it's time for the placenta now. She's like, stand up. So I stood up in the pool holding the baby and she just kind of gave a little tug of the umbilical cord. And she's like, okay, push. I pushed. Placenta came straight out and she caught it like in a pot.
Wow. She's not messing around.
No, she's
ready.
Yeah, exactly. And my husband was like, wow, that looks so easy. And I was like, yeah, it is easy when you just pushed out a baby. Like, and then that was that. Like I didn't have any hemorrhaging. I obviously did bleed, but it wasn't out of the ordinary. I got out of the tub. My midwife had like a little like waterproof spot set up for me on the couch where I laid down with the baby. And we nursed and she checked me. I didn't have any tears, which was amazing.
Whoa, nice.
I couldn't believe it, to be honest. I was expecting to have tears, because I felt numb. So I thought maybe this could be bad and my body's like protecting me from the reality of it. But no, I didn't have any tears. I had a few grazings, like one just at the opening, the vaginal opening, and then like one just up a little bit higher from that. But like my perineum, like everything was completely fine and intact. So I didn't need a single stitch, which I'm so grateful for.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
it's the dream. Grateful. This is the dream birth.
And then that was that. We just hung out on the couch. My midwife brought us some cupcakes because she was like, you need some carbs. And we ate cupcakes and I nursed and he latched straight away. And he has a great latch. Didn't have any problems breastfeeding whatsoever.
He's also super cute.
Yeah, he's very so cute. If anyone wants to see what he looks like and see how cute he is, you can go over to my Instagram. It's at Real Robyn Riley on Instagram. If you want to check out some mom, that's where I do like most of the mom content now. It's Instagram because it's just easier and it's instant and that's all I have time for.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was it. That was the birth. I feel very blessed to have had such an easy, like pretty was no complications. Oh no, there was one. Okay. So there was one complication and this kind of like leads back to why I had to be on my side the whole time. Let me just see what he's doing in here. Hey, you okay? Yeah, he's okay. He came out with a nuchal hand. So like his cheek was his hand was against his cheek, which is oftentimes, if you were in the hospital, considered a complication, which sometimes they'll be like, you need to have forceps, you need to have an episiotomy, you need to have maybe a C-section, depending on how much we predict your baby to weigh, right? Didn't affect my ability to birth my baby, didn't cause me to tear. It did cause me to only feel comfortable laboring on my left side because he was coming out on the right side with the hand. Okay. So all the pain was on the right side. So lying on my left, I guess, relieved that pain, that pressure in some way. But yeah, no, that was the only thing that would have been considered a a complication, and he's a healthy, happy 4-week-old baby now.
I just cannot believe it's been a month. So how have you healed?
I've healed great. By week 2, so week 1 was rough, right? Like, because you feel like everything feels loose. Everything feels like if you cough or sneeze, it feels like your entire pelvic floor is going to like explode, basically, because it's so loose. Everything is like very fragile, and I guess it's still in that state that it was in when it sort of was in the birthing mode, right? Mm-hmm. So I could walk from the day after I gave birth, I was able to walk, but I was only able to walk from like my bed to my couch, mm-hmm. which is like maybe 30 feet. And I would be winded, doing that. And I would probably have to stop and lean up against the wall on my way to the couch because I was just so exhausted. I was very dehydrated. I would recommend to any woman and to you, when you're finished giving birth, take a stool softener of some description, because you get so dehydrated and your bowels are kind of put into like what's the right word? Like that. Like they're kind of like put on pause is maybe a way of putting it, because there's so much pressure being put on your bowels and everything. They're not working properly. Things aren't moving through them as easily. And there's almost like a little bit of trauma to your bowels and your intestines through all of that with birth. So if you don't take a stool softener, and there are ones that you can take that are like safe for breastfeeding, like Coles, I think is a good one. I think that's the one that I'm taking. I think that's what it's called, Coles. You will just be very, very constipated, and it will be very, very uncomfortable. And it will make that very first bowel movement, which is something that a lot of women are really afraid of. Some women are more afraid of their first bowel movement than they are of giving birth, especially if they have stitches and stuff, or like hemorrhoids and that kind of stuff. It will make it a lot easier for you. And I didn't, and I knew that I should do that because I had read on mom forums, like, take a stool softener, you won't regret it. I didn't even think about it. And like, I was constipated for like 3 days after I gave birth, and it was very uncomfortable, and it became very stressful by the 3rd day. So then I sent my husband out. I was like, go get me something, please. Like, I'm in agony. And after those first 3 days, you're bleeding a lot, can't really walk, you're afraid to sneeze, you're just like eating as much as possible, getting as much water in as possible, trying to nurse your baby, which can be a little stressful because at that point your milk probably hasn't come in. It's just colostrum, right? So, those first 3 days were a bit intense and they were a bit hard. By the end of the first week, I no longer felt like I needed to kind of like, prop myself up when I was walking. I could walk. Still a bit scary to have a sneeze. My digestion had started to come back online. My grazings were almost healed. So I was using like a peri bottle for when I would go to the washroom. I really highly recommend the Free Day one because it has like an angled back nozzle, which makes it really easy to use. And I was doing Epsom salt sitz baths with like lavender in it and like oatmeal and like different kinds of healing herbs and natural things inside of it. And that helped the healing process immensely because by week 2, I didn't have any pain like whatsoever, like in my nether regions. Like everything felt exactly the way that it did before I had given birth, which I was just like very, very blown away by, to be honest, that was even possible. The one thing that was still an issue is my stomach muscles, which they haven't fully come back together yet. And I have like ligament pain near my hips, where you would get round ligament pain, because obviously it takes 9 months for those ligaments to stretch out. It's going to take more than 4 weeks for them to go back to the way that they were.
Yeah.
So I still have to be careful with how I move sometimes, like if I'm turning over in bed, that kind of a thing. I still, like if I'm lying down, I can't just like get up like this. I still have to turn over to my side and get up that way. But I'm doing like, pelvic floor exercises and ab exercises to try and strengthen all of that. by the beginning of week 3, I could sneeze and cough without feeling like I was going to die, being terrified for my life. And now at the beginning of week 4, I mean, like, if I was allowed to go to the gym, I'd be there right now.
Yeah.
Because I feel that good. I feel no different than what I was before giving birth, really. Aside from a few things with my stomach, that's it.
Wow.
So it's been
what
really
a great
good.
outcome. This is so encouraging because I'm constantly bombarded with people's birth horror stories, which I don't know why everybody wants to tell heavily pregnant women like how fucked up their birth was. I'm like, why are you telling me this? I don't want to know. I don't want to hear your story about how everything went wrong and the hospital messed up and blah, blah. I'm like, I don't want to know. So hearing your story, it was just like, all right, things are going to be fine. And
yeah, I hope that's what the takeaway is from this. Like, yeah, okay. Sometimes birth is traumatic, sometimes, but if you look at like a lot of the stats, even with cesarean, it's in like the most common place is America. So you get like a third of births are cesarean, right? So those are probably the most difficult, possibly traumatic births. Not always, but a lot of them are. That still like leaves 2/3 of births, which are probably not that bad, and you don't hear about those stories as often because, like, I don't know, I think my birth story is kind of boring. It's like kind of textbook.
It's heroic, and that's what you want to hear. You want to hear somebody's textbook birth story. Yeah. Encourage more people to get pregnant.
Exactly. And anyone out there should, at least give yourself the benefit of the doubt that you can have a birth like that too. Because I don't think that the reason why my birth and postpartum have been this way is just pure luck. I'm sure genes do have a bit to play in this and my outcome, but like I did a lot to prepare for this. I did the epinoperineum stretching. I was taking like herbal tonics. I was doing lots of different exercises. I was doing like the spinning babies things. I was like reading as much material as I could from people like Ina May Gaskin about mentally preparing and pain management. And like, I was doing a lot of things. I was drinking the red raspberry leaf tea and eating the dates, like anything that was even remotely, suggesting that it could improve my chances for an easier labor, I was doing that. And I think that even if there was just a placebo effect, like that's good enough for me. I still got the outcome that I wanted, right? And actually I should just mention as well, because I shouldn't gloss over this because it was pretty intense at the time. In my first 2 weeks, I had very severe postpartum anxiety. To the point where I was kind of like convinced that my baby and my husband were going to suddenly die. And so I was like having to check his breathing every 5 minutes, and just like listening to see if he's breathing, see if his belly is moving. And it was compulsive. And I felt totally like mentally insane about it, like I couldn't relax. I was just like sure that he was going to stop breathing. And I was sure that my husband was going to get the coronavirus and die, and that I was going to be a single mother and like everything was going to go to crap. Like there was even this one time where my husband went out to to chop wood in the back garden. And I know it normally takes him about 10 minutes to do that. And he got a phone call while he was out there. So he was out in the back garden on the phone, and that made him take about 20 minutes maybe to chop the wood. And I was sitting on the couch nursing, and I was like, for sure, he chopped an artery and he's bleeding out in the back right now. Oh, so I got up, I go to my back room to check, to see like through the dark, to see if he's moving around out there. And to get to the window, I had to step over a bag of laundry, right? So I stepped over the bag of laundry, looked out the window, and I was like, okay, he's fine. Went back to the couch, and I was like, you just stepped over that bag of laundry while holding the baby? You could have tripped. And you could have dropped the baby, and you could have killed your baby. Like it's just like spiraling, right? Yeah. With these negative, really dark thoughts. Now I still do have them occasionally. Oh, yeah. I still have moments of weakness where I'm just like, whoa, breastfeeding is so taxing. It is such hard work. I feel so worn down. And no one can help me with this because this is my job, right? And it's a big transition mentally to make. So I don't want to like pretend like that hasn't been a reality for me. It has been, but I have been taking my placenta in pill form. Like my midwife did a placenta encapsulation for me. And even if it's just a placebo effect, I feel like taking 2 of those a day really helps. Is he okay? And it has, as I have been taking them, I feel like, you know, that kind of like hormonal craziness that you could probably compare it to like PMS craziness, right? So yeah, the postpartum anxiety is real. It's pretty intense. I didn't have any of the depression part of it. Like, I think that probably having the birth that I wanted helped me a lot with being able to avoid that. But the anxiety was somewhat unavoidable, but it does get better with time. You know, I think eating really well, like I was eating like seaweed chicken soup for like the iodine and the protein and the collagen and stuff. Lots of vitamin C and like lots and lots of like water soluble fruit to get like all that water back in me because I was so dehydrated.
Yeah.
And just sort of resting, which isn't easy. I know there's probably a lot of women who are like me who find it really difficult to let someone help you, you know, when you're used to being the person doing the hosting and the helping. But it is really important for your recovery. Even if you had a birth like mine, where like you don't have like crazy stitches and like all kinds of damage to your body, it is still important that you put your feet up and you let someone else take the reins for those weeks, because the mental side of it is real too. And I think it can sneak up on you if you're not careful.
Yeah. I was talking to my husband. He's like, I need to know how to change a diaper and do all this stuff like right away. I'm like, you need to help me with cooking and cleaning and taking care of the dogs. And that is all you're going to be able to do, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Baby doesn't want dad for a while.
No, he doesn't. And that's like kind of the hard thing as well. Like, there have been times at night during the nighttime feedings where I'm like, this is the second time I've been up tonight, you know, in like a 4-hour stretch. He needs his diaper changed again. And I'm just like looking at my husband snoring out of bed. I'm just like, fuck you. Like, you could just like your life hasn't changed. You know what I mean? And you almost feel a little envious of the fact that he can carry on with business as usual. You know, in the mornings when my baby's in his like active alert phase, he's just like chill and awake. I'll wake up, I'll hand the baby over to him, and then I like get dressed, I'll do my hair, I'll make some breakfast, use the washroom, you know, just maybe put a load of laundry on. And then by that time, the baby's already like, I've had it with you, Dad. Like, give me back to mom. Like, oh, you're not doing it for me right now.
Yeah, I mean, husbands need to prepare for that too, because it probably hurts their feelings.
A little bit. Like, it's kind of funny to watch. Like, my husband will be like, he can't play the piano, but we have a piano in the back, and he'll just be like holding the baby, being like, look, and like pressing pressing the piano keys, trying to distract him long enough until I'm ready to take him back. But I think, you know, his role will come in more when the baby is mobile. Mm-hmm. You know, like he does tummy time with the baby, which he thinks is like training. It's like gym time.
Yeah.
And so he like trains his neck muscles and stuff like that. And that's fine. So like they have their own ways of bonding.
That's true. And then especially when they're toddlers, and moms want to protect the baby against all risk and make sure that they don't engage in any risk-taking behavior. But kids need to. I mean, they need to. Yes. That's when dads really are there to shine, you know, to be
Absolutely.
Like, listen, if he falls, I'll be there. But like, we can't stop him from, you know, from jumping off of stuff. And moms are overprotective in that way. So that's when dads can really swoop in. And
Exactly. So it's a big transition, but, you know, having a positive attitude and staying grateful and being prepared for these things in advance were really helpful. And I hope that anyone out there who's heard my story and like watched my pregnancy journey knows that it's within their capacity to try and mimic that and do that for themselves as well. And, you know, maybe you won't get exactly the birth that you want, you know, but I think you can come damn near close, you know, if you're smart about how you do your pregnancy. Before we go, did you want to give an update about what you're going through
sure.
with your pregnancy?
So I'm 29 and a half weeks. Just about. And things have been going pretty well. I've gained I've gained 28, 29 pounds. And this is kind of like, I think a lot of it is water weight, but like my body has kind of stopped changing. Except my stomach is just getting really hard. Yeah. That's pretty much all that's happening. I'm having some first trimester fatigue, like first trimester level fatigue.
Right. Yeah.
That's real tired. Normal. That's come back. And then last time I saw my midwife, she was feeling my belly and she took my fundal height, and my fundal height was 1 centimeter over, and she felt my belly and she's like, it's a little too squishy. I'm not diagnosing you with polyhydramnios yet, but it's possible. And I was like, what? Because I'm neurotic. So I get on Google and everything. And most people with polyhydramnios, it's a condition where you have too much amniotic fluid. Most people are fine. But it can be caused by birth defects. It can be caused by just issues with the baby, brain issues, anencephaly, some really crazy infections. And so she's like, well, we're going to check you again in a few weeks. And I was like, a week later, I was like, all right, like you guys need to check me and you need to tell me if I have this condition because I want to know. And so they ended up doing an ultrasound and I was like 50th percentile for amniotic fluid. I know.
It's really like kind of negligent of the nurse. I feel like
she was really careful to be like, I know you want all the information, and they're only doing phone calls, like phone call visits. And so when she told me that she wanted to see me in person in 2 weeks, I was like, why? And so she kind of had to tell me like why she was worried,
Right.
And it was right around the time. I guess.
But
yeah.
She should have then at least like been like, okay, this is what I think could possibly be the issue. Here's when your next appointment is.
That's pretty much what she did. I was just unwilling to wait 2 weeks. I was like, no, I'm not waiting 2 weeks to see if I have polyhydramnios. I also was like very skeptical because your fundal height, which is like the top of your uterus to your pubic bone, it's plus or minus 2 centimeters on both sides is within normal range. So I was only measuring 29 weeks when I was 28 weeks. It wasn't,
That's nothing.
That's a lunch right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So everything turned out to be fine. And it was nice to get an unexpected ultrasound and just make sure that everything's fine and everything like that. And so now it's kind of smooth sailing, but because of this coronavirus, all of my appointments up to 36 weeks are going to be on the phone. And I'm not jazzed about that, especially because the average age of my OB-GYN office has to be like 30. It's not like an office filled with geriatric folk. But when I went there last week, they had like a little station on the outside. The lady's wearing a mask and gloves. It's like a little quarantine station. She takes my temperature and she's like, do you have a fever? Have you had any shortness of breath? I was like, look how fat I am. Of course I've had shortness of breath. Like naturally I have shortness of breath. And she was like, well, is it a new symptom? I'm like, no, it's about 7 months old. It perfectly aligns when I got pregnant. I'm just at my wit's end with this because people like me are going to get substandard care, and some people are not going to go to the hospital when they need to because they're afraid of encountering the coronavirus. And when you look at the data, it's like your odds of a fatality of the coronavirus at age 25 to like 35 is so low compared to the chance that you're having a pregnancy complication that needs to be investigated. And so it just makes me furious. Like I have to have phone appointments for the duration of my pregnancy until I'm almost term. Is that really what has to happen here?
I feel like that's really, whatever happened to like women and children first?
Yeah, really.
I think in the very least, like, why can't they have like, they say like, okay, well, these few midwives, you're now making house calls. Like I don't see how just like not giving women in their third trimester their needed appointments is the appropriate solution to the issue that they're facing.
Because they're so worried that we're going to be exposed to the coronavirus. But, I keep talking about all of these unintended consequences of coronavirus, and like no one wants to hear it because everybody's so afraid of the virus. But there will be hidden fatalities associated with this. Just based on the way they're treating healthcare now. Yeah. And it's just such a weird time to be pregnant. It's so weird.
It
But
really is. It really,
my sister-in-law
really is.
just gave birth and everything went fine, and she was in a hospital, and it's just like you kind of, like you said, you have to do it. You have to do it. So I guess
I'm sure you'll be just fine.
Oh, yep. But otherwise, things are going well. So I'll be term in 7.5 weeks. Is that right? I know, 8 weeks.
Wow.
And then if I'm like all the women in my family, I'll probably go to 41.5 and and then have a giant baby. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Drink raspberry leaf tea.
Yeah, I don't want to go over 40 weeks. I'm already like, get this baby out of me. Get it out of me.
I'm like fairly certain that helped.
Yeah, and it was 4 days before you were due.
4 days, exactly, yeah, before I was due.
I can't do it anymore. It's like, I'm so past the, like, look at my cute bump. Like, I'm Earth Mother, blah, blah. I'm like fat and farting. I'm just like a double chin wrapped in a fart. Oh. And I'm gross and I can't shave my legs. And like, I catch my reflection in mirrors and I'm like, what the shit? What happened?
Yeah, you're in the home stretch now. This is the hardest part, but I think, it makes even labor that much easier because you're like, I don't have to feel like this anymore. I can go back to myself. Like I just love being able to lean forward. Like I still
remember that.
I still savor it. Like if me and my husband are like watching something while we're eating, and like the coffee table is obviously very low. So if I'm eating something, I'll lean over to the coffee table to eat and take a bite. And I'm just like, oh, that feels so good to be able to lean forward and eat.
And then not having to drink
at a time. Without feeling like you're going to explode.
I know that's another thing that's been new with this third trimester is like this feeling that I am just starving, but also being so full that there's practically food in my esophagus. It's just like, I don't know where my stomach is anatomically, but it's got to just, I'm pretty sure the baby is just like, it's so weird. So
are you having any heartburn or anything?
Oh yeah. I got the GERD.
Oh no.
That's okay. Rough. I'm like a baby now in that I have to eat and then be elevated for 15 minutes or I'll get heartburn.
You're in the home stretch.
It's not so, I'm so happy that I'm pregnant that I'm like, this is all a small price to pay. I'll be singing a different tune when I'm in labor.
Yeah. And you're going to have like a little girl, which means you get to like dress her like a little doll and like do all the cute things.
My neighbor brought me some secondhand clothes and she gave me these Oshkosh B'gosh overalls that have they're pink and they have a little heart on them. I'm so hormonal. I like opened it up. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cute. It's the cutest. But yeah, it'll be fun. I'm so glad that we finally were able to do this. I don't know if everybody knew that you gave birth because I presume some people follow the YouTube channel that don't follow the other social media. And they're like, did you guys just stop making content immediately after launching a channel? But it's really hard to film with a newborn. I mean,
it's really hard. It's, I've been wanting to do this for 2 weeks. And even now you can see like the struggle is real.
Yeah. Imagine when we have 2.
I want him to be happy. But also like, it's just been so cool to finally have this experience that I've been like sort of building up to for months and months. And people have been messaging me like, oh, I can't wait to hear your birth story. And I'm really excited to finally be able to get it out there and share. And if anyone has any questions about home birth or wants advice about midwifery or home birth from my experience, you can follow me on Twitter. Or not follow me on Twitter. You just go to Twitter and my DMs are open. So it's at CCBucko, CCBucko, and send me a DM. I'll do my best to respond because I know there's a lot of women right now, like as you said, who are in their third trimester or even second trimester, and they're kind of thinking, do I want to go ahead with birthing in hospital? And some people are considering home birth now as an alternative, which I think is fine. But they're doing it not because it's like my heart wants this. Right. They're doing it because they feel afraid. And so they don't have a lot of information and they're probably trying to get as much information as they can as fast as possible. So please feel free to use me as a resource and you can contact me over there, or on Instagram at Real Robyn
Right.
Riley. I think my messages are open over there as well. Shoot me a DM and I'll do my best to respond as fast as I can.
Oh, and there was one more thing that I wanted to tell pregnant women about COVID right now. I've done tons of research on the effect of COVID on pregnancy, on the fetus, and everything like that. And pregnant women are not at an increased risk of basically any adverse pregnancy consequence except for preterm labor. And even those women were giving birth after 35 weeks when it would probably be fine. Yeah. So if you get COVID, it's very likely that a lot of us have already had it and have no idea. It's not the end of the world. So
yeah, there's a study floating around right now where there's a bunch of doctors that were comparing SARS, MERS, and COVID-19.
That abstract was bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, they COVID-19 has colloquially become coronavirus. When you're reading that article and it's like coronavirus,
they're
coronavirus,
all coronaviruses.
They're all coronaviruses and they're different. They're not the same, right? So the outcomes of pregnant women who had MERS or SARS is not synonymous with what's happening with COVID-19.
No,
I think
and
it's really
MERS, the fatality rate of MERS is 40% or 35%. Yeah. And we're looking at probably a fatality rate of, 0.3% tops. And in that study, in the aggregate, or in the abstract, they aggregate all of the data. And then once you splice it out, you realize that like the COVID sample was super tiny and they didn't even test for some adverse conditions like miscarriage and things like that. So none of the data from the other coronaviruses could be applied. But I've been seeing that people are emailing me this study. I'm like, why? Like, what is compelling you to try to freak out a heavily pregnant woman? Like what? And then it'll be like, this is why you need to have a home birth. It's like, having a home birth also is not going to protect me from the virus. Like if I contract it in hospital while I'm giving birth, is the baby going to be better off? I mean, it's just nonsensical. It's like, don't send pregnant women stuff like this to freak me out.
I'm sure if there are pregnant women out there, they're like you are doing what they need to do to find out what the reality of the situation is. And they're taking it seriously and they're doing what they need to do. And chances are they will all be fine.
Yeah, I'm just not super worried about it, but I know it's a really anxiety provoking time. So,
well, yeah. And I think there was you sent me a link from Ottawa midwifery where like the care is changing. And I think that's probably one of the more realistic, understandable reasons to want to change your care, because that practice was like, we're trying to make access to cesarean section more access to cesarean section, so everyone has to have epidurals now.
Yeah,
right. Like,
which doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense because epidurals can increase your chance of having cesarean section.
Right,
so you're likely increasing the amount of cesareans that are going to need to be had.
Why wouldn't they just say a valid
reason to want to be like, maybe I'll have a home birth?
yeah. I mean,
especially
I think
if you were going natural anyway.
They might have been doing that as a tactic, because I reread that and it said like at this hospital, they're saying that everybody has to get an epidural to open the access to C-sections. But if you're having a home birth, we can evaluate that with you. So I think that it might have been like a scare tactic from the midwives to be like, have a home birth.
Maybe it's possible. I don't know.
Everybody should just be scared. If you're going to be scared about something, be scared about how your care is changing. And if you feel like you have a pregnancy complication, you need to go to the hospital. Go to the hospital. Don't be like, I'm going to sit this one out. It's probably fine because I'm worried about coronavirus. Like, go to the hospital. That's the right thing to do. Anyway, so hopefully we'll be back soon. Give us some requests in the comments about what you guys want to hear about next time. Maybe a little bit more about how Robyn's recovering and taking care of a newborn. I'm sure would be really helpful.
And newborn essentials, things that I got that I'm really happy that I got, that have made the newborn period a lot easier, because I have a lot to say about that as well. And I think I've kept it pretty minimal, as you know. Like, I haven't gone overboard with it, but there definitely are a few things that I'm very, very grateful that I got that have made this transition a lot easier, for sure. So we can share those things too.
Yeah, cool. We'll do some product reviews on this channel too.
Yeah.
We will. Okay, thanks guys. We'll see you soon. Bye.